Picture, if you will, a sweltering midnight in 1858, within a humble wooden hut on the island of Ternate, Indonesia. A man named Alfred Russel Wallace lies collapsed upon a creaking bed, ravaged by the violent fevers of malaria. His body trembles uncontrollably amidst chills and cold sweats. His consciousness drifts precariously between reality and hallucination. Yet, in this narrow crevice between life and death, the fragmented observations of butterfly wings and avian beaks in his mind suddenly snap together like a perfect puzzle. He bolts upright, and with a trembling hand under the flicker of a kerosene lamp, pens a draft that would fundamentally alter human understanding forever. He had no inkling that these few pages, once dispatched, would trigger an intellectual earthquake in distant London, powerful enough to topple any academic authority. His name was Alfred Russel Wallace. Tonight, by the soft pulse of the hearth, let us journey through his true life with this story, one you need not labor to remember. He was the co-discoverer of the theory of evolution, a solitary hero who spent over 20,000 days wandering to write a natural epic. Why did he choose humility in the most brilliant scientific race of all? What profound inner peace did he find in the silent depths of the tropical rainforest? In the quiet of the night, let us slowly unveil the mystery of this naturalist saint's fate, a destiny as deep as a sea breeze and as solemn as the forest glades. Wallace's life seemed painted from its inception with the somber tints of poverty and displacement. Born in 1823 to an ordinary Welsh family, his father was a lowly clerk who spent his days in melancholy following failed investments. While his aristocratic peers were debating rhetoric upon the manicured lawns of Oxford and Cambridge, the 14-year-old Wallace was forced to quit school to apprentice under his brother, learning to survey land in the open fields. It was this daily communion with soil, weeds, and rocks that taught him to observe the world through an intensely pragmatic lens. To him, every rise in the topography and every inclination of a tree was a silent language left by the divine. During those solitary hours of measurement, he devoured books on global voyages, and a heart destined for the wilderness was ignited amidst the rubble of his circumstances. With no research grants and no government patronage, the only path he could conceive was to venture into distant lands, collecting rare butterfly and insect specimens to sell to London collectors to fund his scientific ambitions. In 1848, he liquidated his meager possessions and, armed with a youthful, almost reckless courage, plunged into the boundless green mists of the Amazon basin. His 4 years in the Amazon served as Wallace's rite of passage as a naturalist, yet they were also the first cruel crushing weight exerted by fate. In the depths of the jungle, he endured the stings of venomous insects, the predatory gaze of jaguars, and a loneliness that bordered on madness. He amassed tens of thousands of unique specimens, the only ticket he possessed to the halls of academia. However, on his return voyage in 1852, destiny played a devastating trick. His ship caught fire in the middle of the ocean. As the vessel sank into the inferno, Wallace sat in a lifeboat, watching helplessly as 4 years of his life's work, thousands of exquisite butterfly specimens and his precious journals, dissolved into floating ash upon the waves. For the 10 days that followed, he drifted upon the vast Atlantic, tormented by thirst and hunger, yet he exhibited a composure that was almost unnerving. He did not weep, nor did he curse the heavens. He simply stared at the horizon, calculating the direction of the currents. This extreme rationality allowed him to rise like a phoenix from the ashes. Having narrowly escaped death to return to London, he rested for only a few months before setting sail once more for the opposite side of the globe, the Malay archipelago. This time, he was no longer a mere collector, he was a prophet carrying the memory of ashes, prepared to decipher the underlying code of life itself. The 8 years in the Malay archipelago were the closest Wallace ever came to witnessing a miracle. He paddled his canoe through islands scattered like pearls, his skin was tanned to bronze by the equatorial sun, and his hands were thick with the calluses of rowing. He keenly observed that, though separated by only a few miles of channel, the birds and mammals on either side were fundamentally different. This boundary, later immortalized as the Wallace Line, led him to realize that geographical shifts were the secret engines of biological evolution. In that palm-thatched hut shadowed by malaria, the high fever stripped away all worldly arrogance, leaving only the purest intuition. In a state of semi-consciousness, a passage from Malthus regarding population theory surfaced in his mind, and a flash of insight struck. It was those minute variations better adapted to the environment that served as the sole sparks for the continuity of a species. With no colleagues to consult, his only confidant was the endless rain outside his window. Thus, he composed his thesis and sent it to the only scientific titan he truly revered, Charles Darwin. That letter traversed half the globe, and when Darwin opened the envelope at his English estate, he was seized by an unprecedented terror. He discovered that this young man from the ends of the earth had, in a single night of contemplation, captured the very secrets Darwin had kept hidden for 20 years. What followed was one of the most gentlemanly yet poignant chapters in the history of science. To protect Darwin's academic primacy, his friends arranged a joint publication without Wallace's knowledge. Though Wallace's name appeared after Darwin's, he harbored no resentment. On the contrary, he felt profoundly honored. While Darwin's On the Origin of Species swept across the globe, Wallace was still tracking orangutans in the mud of the Malay archipelago. Returning to England in his later years, though he received medals of honor, he maintained the serenity of a wandering soul. He never vied for fame or profit, even going so far as to graciously name this monumental theory Darwinism. His life seemed to perpetually skirt around wealth. He worked as a school examiner to make ends meet and wrote popular science essays for a living. Yet he maintained, "I possess the entirety of the natural world. I am the richest man on this planet." This total detachment from worldly success bestowed upon his late life image a quality of near-transparent nobility. Late into the night, he wrote to the youth telling them, "To observe nature is not to conquer it, but to find one's place within the interconnected rhythm of all things." In November 1913, at the age of 90, Alfred Russel Wallace peacefully closed his eyes in his sleep. Before he passed, he reminded his family to keep the windows closed, for he wished to hear the sound of autumn leaves tapping against the English soil outside. In his long life, he had listened from the Amazon to the Malay archipelago, journeying from the hallucinations of fever to the zenith of reason. He left behind no great fortune, yet the 20,000-plus species records he bequeathed continue to nourish biology to this day. He answered the question posed at the beginning. In that silent rainforest, he found an absolute freedom, the freedom of breathing as one with all existence. Our story for tonight has concluded. I hope Wallace's sincerity toward life brings you some measure of solace in the deep of the night. In this clamorous era, there are truths more precious than money and more eternal than status, and that is a heart of pure devotion toward nature. Now, release all your thoughts. Let your consciousness, like a migratory bird over the Wallace line, lightly beat its wings and fly toward that quiet, blooming wilderness of dreams. All things are evolving, and in this moment you are safe, you are whole, and you are deeply loved by the natural world. Good night.